What's up guys, D-Rock1992 here. For this next video, I am going to be highlighting the major films that came out in the month of January of this year, 2016. So I'll be talking about those films week by week, and so without further ado, I'm going to get right in. Actually, before I get into it, I'm not going to be talking about the films that came out in February and all that. I mean, I'm not going to highlight the films that are coming out in February because I'm going to save that for my... I'm going to highlight the films in February for my video on films that came out in February. So, just a little bit of a thing there. I know I normally... last year I did a lot of the... I highlighted the movies that came out the previous month, and then I highlighted films that would be coming out in the next month. So I'm not going to be doing that this time. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. The first film that came out theatrically, wide release in 2016, was a horror movie called The Forest. And horror movies generally get a reputation. There are definitely... January is definitely, for one thing, considered the worst month to put a movie in, because a lot of movies get dumped in January and they turn out to not have great critical reviews. In my, knowledge of the month of January in films. So, The Forest stars a couple stars. You might have heard of these names, I'm not sure. Natalie Dormer and Taylor Kinney. They've been in some stuff. I don't really know exactly. I know them by name, but it's like I don't really know them as being stars in other films. But yeah, this movie is... a girl enters a forest and shit happens. That's pretty much what I would say is the plot of this film. So, the film itself, so far, I think it might be out of theaters though. On a budget of $10 million, they made this movie for little money. The box office was $30.5 million, so that's definitely, you can definitely consider it a success in terms of what the budget was and how much they made. However, critically, the movie got an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, when I said that January was the dumping ground for movies in general, this one's no exception. This one is no exception for sure. So, based on the rating. So, The Forest did not do that well at all. That was January 8th. The weekend of January 15th featured a few films. Featured 3 films that I'll be highlighting. First off is 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, directed by Michael Bay. Now, Michael Bay has had a history of making a lot of money with his movies, but not being a fan. But critics are not fans of his movies. I think his highest movie was, in terms of percentage in Rotten Tomatoes, was The Rock, and I think that was 67%. So that tells you something. Most of his films fail in the eyes of critics. And the movie that Michael Bay came off Transformers 4: Age of Extinction, which made over $1 billion, but was panned by critics. Critics hated the movie. So he comes out with 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. If the word Benghazi sounds familiar, this is an event that happened. So this is based on a true story about soldiers in Benghazi. And I don't really know a lot about that entire affair, so I'm just going to definitely say it's a true story. It's an action movie, in typical Michael Bay style. You know, Michael Bay's known for huge explosions and great visual splendor. So the movie stars John Krasinski, who is known. John Krasinski is probably best known as being a character on The Office, the American TV series The Office. James Badge Dale's a name I've heard of. He's in this movie. Toby Stevens, and some other characters as well. So this movie, so far, on a $50 million budget, it's made $50.9 million. So I think it's still in theaters anyway, so it's going to make some more money. But it looks like box office wise, it's not going to make a ton of money, but it'll make a little bit of an amount anyway. Critically, it got a 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's actually not bad. That's actually good for a Michael Bay movie. So there you go. The next film that I'm going to be talking about that was released in the weekend of January 15th is an animated movie, the first animated American movie this year, called Norm of the North. And it is about a polar bear who travels to New York City, and stuff happens. I don't really know a lot about the terms of the plot and all that, but there's some talent in this movie. Rob Schneider, who's a frequent Adam Sandler collaborator, is in this movie as the title guy. Heather Graham, who you may know as Felicity Shagwell in Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. That's how I know her. Yeah. The Hangover films, as Hangover and Hangover 3, is Stripper Jade. Those are probably your two best known roles. Bowfinger, she was in that movie. Ken Jeong, another Hangover star, is in this film. He is a crazy Japanese guy. Or Korean. He's Korean. But yeah, I mean, Ken Jeong is in this movie. Gabriel Iglesias, a stand-up comedian. Fluffy is the one word you probably kind of can associate him with. So those are pretty much the big names. The movie itself hasn't done extremely well. $18 million budget, $16.3 million at the box office thus far. And critically, the movie only has a 7% on Rotten Tomatoes. So pretty much every critic hated the movie. So another failure of a movie in the month of January. And then the other film I'm going to talk about is the sequel to Ride Along, the comedy that came out in 2014 with Ice Cube and Kevin Hart, Ride Along 2. Now, I never saw Ride Along. I haven't seen it yet. I would like to see it at some point. The first Ride Along did not get good reviews with critics, but it definitely made money. Ice Cube and Kevin Hart return in this movie. Olivia Munn is in the film. Ken Jeong, another Ken Jeong appearance in January in a film. Tyrese Gibson, probably best known for the Fast and the Furious movies. He's a singer too. He's a rapper too, but he's in the Fast and Furious movies. T.I., who's a rapper who appears in some movies on occasion, is in this film. So Ride Along 2, they're in, I guess the gang, they're in Florida or something like that. But yeah, Ride Along 2 thus far, The movie has made $100.3 million on a $40 million budget. So box office wise, it has done extremely well. Critically, however, the movie only has a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. So the first movie, as I mentioned, did not get good critical reviews, but was a box office success. This movie is pretty much the same. For sure. So, the next week in January was the week of January 22nd, and there were some films that came out that month. Let's see here. There were 3 films in particular I'm going to talk about that came out in that month. The first one is Dirty Grandpa, and no, it's not bad. It's not a sequel to Bad Grandpa or anything like that. Those Bad Grandpa or the Jackass movies. There's one called Bad Grandpa or something like that. But Dirty Grandpa is a comedy film starring Robert De Niro, Zac Efron, and Aubrey Plaza, who's a known name. Who's a pretty known name, pretty much. But the main characters are Robert De Niro and Zac Efron. This movie's about a guy who's about to be engaged to be married, played by Efron, who who is tricked by his grandfather in going to Florida or something like that. Tongue twister. I actually am looking forward to this movie. I want to see it at some point. I probably won't see it in theaters, but I'll check it out definitely when it comes out. So yeah, the movie in general, so far, it was made on an $11.5 million budget, and it made $29.4 million at the box office so far. So that's okay. Those are okay numbers. But critically, 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. So critics hated this movie. Excuse me. So, another movie in January that was bad. Another one is a horror thriller movie called The Boy. The next film I'm going to talk about here. It's about this boy who isn't real, and I'm just going by the commercials and all that I've seen. There's this boy who, the mother and father of the boy, I don't know if they know if the boy's real or not, but they pretend the boy's real or something like that. There's this nanny or something. There's this nanny, I think, who breaks one of the rules of the household that she's in, and the boy takes revenge, something like that. Needless to say, you probably can tell I have not seen this film. So, it's a psychological horror film. The star I know of in here is Lauren Cohen, who, actually, a lot of you may know, she's a star on AMC's The Walking Dead. She's one of the stars in that film, or in that TV series. The Boy. Another horror movie that was made on a limited budget, $10 million. Box office, it's made $34.4, so you can definitely consider that a success. Critically, though, 25% on Rotten Tomatoes, so another rotten review for that. The next film I'm going to talk about is The Fifth Wave. Science fiction film. It is about it's a post-apocalyptic, or it's a science fiction film, and I think it's about an apocalypse that's happening or something like that, and Chloe Grace Moretz is the main star of the film. She has to go save a brother or something like that, but I think it's kind of an apocalyptic type event. It's a science fiction film, and it's a It's one of those teen movies. One of those. God, what are those films? Why and it's a certain type of genre of film. It's kind of like what Twilight is to a lot of fans, and it's kind of like what The Hunger Games is to a lot of fans, and the Divergent series, just to name a few. So The Fifth Wave stars Chloe Grace Moretz, Ron Livingston. I've heard the name. I think he was in that movie Office Space that came out in 1999. Maria Bello, I've heard that name. Liev Schreiber, I've heard the name. Some of the people in the movie. The Fifth Wave, $38 million budget, and it's made $84.2 million so far. So it's definitely a financial success. However, critically, the movie only has a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, making it another stinker in the month of January. And those are YA, young adult science fiction films. The Hunger Games, young adult science fiction, and the Divergent in particular is a young adult science fiction, and other things as well. So anyway, moving on, I'm going to talk about the final week of January 29th. And there were 4 films that I'm going to talk about that came out in January 29th. And the first one is Jane Got a Gun. Jane Got a Gun is a movie that that's had a lot of drama attached to it. They switched directors. I think they switched a director once. They switched several actors. A lot of actors came and went. There was a director that came and went. So this movie went through a lot. Finally got made. Released January 29th. In a limited release, I believe. Yeah, limited release. It came out... let's see. It was made on a $25 million budget, and it's only made $2.1 million so far. So it might be a flop. I don't know. Let's see. The company itself that made the film at first, they went bankrupt, so that was another big problem with the film itself. And I'll be right back anyway. I gotta plug in my computer. Alright, I'm back. So Jane Got a Gun, limited release, came out January 29th, and hasn't made a lot of money so far. The reception for this film is only a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes. So a lot of the drama, you could blame some of that on the drama in the film in particular, but yeah, this film's been through a lot, so a bad review for this movie. The next film I'm going to talk about it's a parody of 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of Black. It's starring Marlon Wayans. Marlon Wayans is a funny guy. He's been in a lot of different things. He was in the Haunted House movies, A Haunted House and A Haunted House 2. He was in the first 2 Scary Movie films. The guy's a funny man. He's very funny. 50 Shades of Black is, yeah, like I said, a direct parody of 50 Shades of Grey. And starring in the film, few names. Marlon Wayans, Jane Seymour makes an appearance. Jane Seymour is probably best known, for me at least, for 2 movies. Live and Let Die as the Bond girl in that movie. She was a Bond girl, and she was in a movie called Wedding Crashers with Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn. She was a very seductive mistress in that movie. Fred Willard also. He's been in a lot of comedy movies. You may not know the name, but you'll definitely know the face when you see him in movies. He's been in like everything. So the movie itself made $5 million, a $5 million budget. It's made $10 million. So it is a smaller film. So it'll probably make a little bit more. Because it is only the second week, I think, it was released. So it's going to make more money. So, but receptive-wise, for Rotten Tomatoes, the film has only gotten a 7%. Only a 7% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it just didn't get the reviews. So another bad movie in January, for sure. But I'll definitely see it when it comes out. I'm not going to see 50 Shades of Grey. That movie, I have no interest in that film. But I will see 50 Shades of Black. Definitely. I'll see it when it comes out, probably, on DVD or Blu-ray. The next film I'm going to talk about is the third movie in the franchise, Kung Fu Panda 3. So this franchise has been very successful for the DreamWorks is the studio that makes these movies. I have not watched the first two Kung Fu Pandas. I've heard that they're very good. This movie in particular, it stars a lot of the people that were in the first two films: Jack Black, Angelina Jolie, Jackie Chan, Seth Rogen, some other names: J.K. Simmons, Bryan Cranston, Dustin Hoffman. A big all-star cast. Big cast. A lot of well-known names. So, the film, I guess the panda has to train other pandas in order to defeat an evil force. So, like I said, I have not seen the first two Kung Fu Panda movies. This movie in particular, so far, it was made on a budget of $145 million, and it made $199 million. So far, it's made $199 million, so it's going to be a big success financially. It already has been. Critically, it has a 80% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The first fresh rating that we've had. The first fresh rating that I've talked about here for Rotten Tomatoes in this channel. So, and it's an animated movie, which typically a lot of animated movies do well anyway, percentage-wise for Rotten Tomatoes. At least Disney movies do, and DreamWorks to an extent. Pixar does. They're critical darlings for Rotten Tomatoes, but yeah, Kung Fu Panda 3, it's made the money, it's got the good reviews, and still in theaters. And then the final film I'm going to talk about for this video is a movie called The Finest Hours. It's a Disney film, produced by Walt Disney Pictures, and it tells a story it chronicles the true account of the 1952 United States Coast Guard rescue of the SS Pendleton after it split apart during a nor'easter off the New England coast. So, this movie is based on a true story, and it's got some names in it. Chris Pine, probably best known for Star Trek, as he's Captain Kirk. Horrible Bosses 2, he was in that movie. He's been in some other stuff too. Into the Woods from a couple years ago, he was in that film. Casey Affleck, probably best known as the brother of Ben Affleck. He's in this movie. John Ortiz, Eric Bana, I believe was the Hulk if I'm not mistaken, in the first. Yeah, he was the Hulk in the 2003 Hulk movie. And that's pretty much it. There's some other names too, but the main names: Chris Pine, Casey Affleck, John Ortiz, and Eric Bana. For me anyway. Excuse me. It has a budget of $70 to $80 million. So far, the movie's made 24.3. It is early. This film will probably, I see it projecting even, probably about even, maybe a little bit more. So it won't be a huge financial success, probably, but it'll still be okay. Critically, the movie has a 59% on Rotten Tomatoes. So 59% on Rotten Tomatoes. Almost fresh, but just a little bit rotten. So anyway, that is it for the films for January. Little review of the films of January. So there's 2 films that were in the 50s for percentage on Rotten Tomatoes, the highest being Kung Fu Panda 3. A lot of films in the single digits. Dirty Grandpa, Norm of the North, just some films that just didn't do it for a lot of critics and all that. So, a pretty terrible month for January, but definitely to be expected. But Kung Fu Panda 3, making some money, definitely. So, that is it for my January movies review. And I will definitely get into, once the end of February comes around, I will be talking about the February films. And there's some exciting stuff coming in February. But stay tuned for the February video. D-Rock 1992, out.